Is this one of the best bottles that no one's talking about? I think it is. Let's get into it. This is the Remus Master Distiller Experimental Series 9-year. This is their Experimental Series 1. So this is the first release in that from the historic Ross and Squibb Distillery. And again, Remus, number 1 of that experimental series. So, what's experimental about it? Have you seen it around? Why aren't people talking about it? Those are some of the things I'm going to talk about today. But as you could tell, I really like this bottle. This is probably one of the biggest surprises of the year for me. And around that $65 price point is maybe the deal of the year. So what is this? Well, let me just sort of get into this. Again, I told you this was their first release of their experimental series. The experimental part is the fact that it's aged in Seguin Moreau barrels. I think I'm saying that right. Seguin Moreau. I've heard both. We're just going to say Seguin Moreau. What is that? Well, it's a specific cooperage. So the barrel maker is a little different. Go back about a decade ago, right in the middle of the bourbon boom, and you could imagine there was a shortage of various things. One of those, in the midst of all of the sort of booming industry in bourbon, were barrels. So distillers had to find some new things. So some of our distillers here in the country, bourbon distillers, started to look in the old world, right? And when I say old world, I mean sort of in that wine, the old world, new world wine industry, and went to France, specifically Seguin Moreau. Now, Seguin Moreau also has a cooperage in Napa, and I think they may, and for those who are really into wine, you might know a bit more than me, but Seguin Moreau stems from the Burgundy region in France and are really known for the barrels they put together for wine and brandy. So I think that's a pretty unique thing. One of the things, too, that you might be more familiar with in the whiskey world is sort of how is it toasted? How is it charred? So I think this is a lightly charred and heavily toasted cooperage. So that means that on some of those barrels, if you've ever been on a tour and you've seen some of the inside of the whiskey barrels, they're really dark, just looks like you pulled a piece of wood out of the fire overnight. When you're putting it out in the morning after camping, I think it's not going to be like that, right? This is going to be a really sort of lightly toasted, lightly charred, so maybe some darkness to the wood, but it's gonna not have that fully burnt look like you might get on some classic American bourbons. So what does that do to this pour? Let's get into it. Let's take a look at this. I love this color. It is a sort of a light brown. It's got a bit of like a ruby color in it. In this camera, it definitely looks like that. Maybe a little sort of amber hue. At 107 proof too, you can see it sticks to the glass. There's a really good viscosity, and one of the things I really like about Ross and Squibb are some of the lower proof releases that they have, which are close to cast strength, if not cast strength. I don't think this is cast strength, but I would venture to say it is close. You might be saying, wait a second, Mac, you're crazy. 107 proof is not low proof. I mean low proof in the sense of 120s to even 130 for some cast strength offerings these days. And some special releases get into that. I think 107 proof would be low proof in that situation. But enough of me yapping here. Let's get into the pour. Oh, it's just a super sweet, light brown sugar nose. I almost get some light orange, too, and maybe like maraschino cherry. It's just a really inviting nose. and I really love that about it. Let's get into the actual taste here. Oh yeah, it is sort of delicate, sweet first, and it's really, it really coats your tongue, which is another thing I love in whiskey. I really like the viscosity of my pours to be sort of to sort of cover the tongue and the palate. Um, Really on that first pour, it is. I really get a lot of sweetness. It's not sort of like sickly sweet, right? Like where it's like too much like candy. It's more like a dessert pastry creme brulee, which I really love. Let's go into it again for the second sip. Yeah, now with the second sip, I start to get some of this, some complexity on the pour. It's not just a sweet pour. You get some of that oak. Um, you get a bit of like molasses, like a lighter. It's not a heavy molasses note. It's almost a maple kind of syrup thing. Um, and I get a little bit of that orange too, like a caramelized bit, um, too. And even now in the finish, it's still going, which is another sign of a great pour, right? Like when you spend money on whiskey, the most part, you don't want it just to sip it down and it's gone. This is one of those that sticks with you. Um, let's get into the third sip here. And yeah, with that third sip, I even get some spicy sort of, and by spice I mean, and spicy I mean almost like a caramel cake spice, baking spice, nutmeg there, and I do get a creaminess too, like a vanilla frosting. So I again, this is just such a drinkable pour. It's different than a lot of things on my shelf in that it is sweet. I definitely have some sweet pours and some toasted bourbons, but this one has a certain amount of complexity that doesn't make it just one note. It's got a really cool story. I'm a nerd. I nerd out about the different cooperages and the different regions and the history, and I think it is really cool to as you start to learn more about whiskey and dig into some of the things. If you're a nerd like me, um, start to hear about some of those stories, like what happened 10 years ago, what's in your glass right now, what are all the things that happened to get it there. And I think Seguin Moreau barrel is a really interesting and a really cool addition to what Ross and Squibb are doing. I know there's some other barrels out there, and I know I'm going to be looking for some of those. I think this is a really cool pour. I really love this release, and I think for this $65 price range, it's a special bottle. You got to look for this. I don't know why people aren't really talking about this, but again, this is the Remus Experimental Number One, 107 proof, 9 year. Go grab it. Cheers.